Let me ask you something. What's the most accessible genre of horror? No, you might have to read a book for that one. Yeah, good luck getting that right. What the fuck? To me, the answer to that question was, for a long time, found footage. The beautiful thing about found footage is that it's a style that, at least from a cinematic perspective, isn't that hard to get down. Sure, there's still a lot of artistry and intentional camera work that goes into it, but for the most part, anyone can do it. I mean, you just pick a location, insert a freaky dude, and then shake that fucking camera. Boom, found footage. But even then, not everyone has a camera, or other actors to film shakily. Some people don't even have access to a location. Could there possibly be an even more accessible subgenre of horror? Did you read the title? Analog horror has more or less taken the internet by storm, with just about everyone and their mom making a low-fidelity love letter to the genre. And it's easy to see why. I mean, an entire medium of horror founded on amateurish editing, basic photo manipulation, and covered with so much film grain you think you stumbled across Slenderman's porn collection? What's not to like? My point being, though, is that analog horror has enabled people from near and far to share their unique and totally not derivative ideas with the world, sometimes even gaining the attention of larger creators who only help to boost interest and engagement in their work. In theory. In a way, analog horror is the people's genre. That's why some of them really fucking suck. What the actual fuck is wrong with you? But enough negativity. Real me, tell the people why we're here. That guy's such an asshole. Hi everybody, welcome to this new installment of my YouTube channel's a thinly veiled excuse for me to make arts and crafts. I made a tier list! I've been watching a lot of analog horror series recently, primarily to learn more about the genre, what it has to offer, and what I think some series get right and other series don't get as right. And, like any content-stealing son of a bitch, I decided to rank them for views on the internet. Got my little wicker basket of destiny here, which I'll be pulling from, which is, I just realized the optics is going to be very difficult since I can't get in there without putting down the microphone. Fuck, this is a nightmare. Quick point of clarification though, this video is not meant to be a takedown or like a shit-throwing session at any of the series that I mention. And I recommend you check out anything that I talk about here to form your own opinions or to see if it was more effective for you or if you disagree on me on some stuff. And more importantly, I think it's important to support everything I talk about here because a lot of these are smaller creators who have either just entered this space and are still trying to find their footing, or just people that deserve a little bit more credit than they're being given. I can't tell you the amount of times I've seen videos of like rando YouTubers recapping entire analog horror series, and those videos get like millions of more views than the entire series itself. It would appear that trickle-down economics does not, in fact, work for video views. Or economics, for that matter. So in short, and to hint at my next video down the road, what was that? What was that? Can you tell I'm bisexual? So in short, and to hint at a future video down the road, support the official release. Oh, and stay tuned for the ending for a fun surprise. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But without further ado, let's... My big bag of secrets. It's not even a bag. It's not secrets, you know what's in here. Hey! Gemini Home Entertainment. So full disclosure, I actually watched Gemini Home Entertainment back in like early 2021, around the time in which the analog horror genre was just starting to pick up steam. And I really liked it. And I watched it again recently, and I really liked it. And something I really admired about it back then was just the constant reinvention the series had. Every single video would be so keenly different from the one that came before, while still existing in that same general lore and mythos that it was creating. It's a great example of a series that both is an anthology, but does anthological storytelling in what I believe the most effective way possible. Yes, every single episode's a little bit different, and it does these so well because every single one, despite being kind of different things altogether, still have that fresh take on the genre. A whole episode dedicated to games for children with a kind of freaky undertone underneath it. An informational video about our solar system that explains that Neptune has essentially been infected by this eye-like creature that is actively sending 5G rays and other shit to Earth. An entire informational video about home invasions made for home invaders. And despite all these kind of being, out there and different and, wholly unrelated to one another, all of them hit the mark so well. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the series has a sort of narrative focus as it goes along, with the iris, with the wood crawlers, with deep root disease, all these different things. There is no, every episode's about a different thing. They never coalesce. No, that's not the thing for Gemini Home Entertainment. On the topic of the solar system episode, though, I will say I think that Gemini Home Entertainment is one of the few series in analog horror that does cosmic horror really well. Seeing Neptune become infected by this extraterrestrial, alien life form / parasite, its neighboring celestial bodies and moons being turned into horrifying facsimiles of their former self, like fleshy monsters of sort, that's freaky. The fact that we send a fucking, satellite into it, and then the satellite's getting closer, implying that the iris, Neptune, is getting closer to Earth, that's pretty good. And the visuals therein are great as well. Remy Bode is a phenomenal model worker. The guy is able to turn entire scenes that seem innocuous and create really genuinely horrifying visuals therein. Anytime we see a victim of the deep root disease and the freaky kind of disjointed, almost, if you'll forgive the phrase, inhuman way they move, it is a treat. That being said, the series is not without issues. I think some of the pacing in some of the episodes could really have been streamlined and made a little bit quicker. Sometimes things sort of drag on a little bit longer than they needed to. And apparently Remy agrees with me, because my favorite episode, ironically enough, the Deep Blue one, has been delisted from YouTube for pacing reasons. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, because I liked that video. I thought his pacing was fine, but regardless of that, Gemini Home Entertainment is a phenomenal series that I would highly recommend to anyone who's interested in seeing a series that employs really effective uses of cosmic horror, body horror, and just a slow, meandering ratcheting up of the tension over time. Remy does some phenomenal work. Go ahead and check out his series. Easy A tier. I'm surprised how straight that was. The Monument Mythos. How would I describe the Monument Mythos? The Monument Mythos is like if you dropped acid in the Hall of Presidents. It's like if you were in a coma and the only way to be woken up is if your half-drunk father very badly retold you the plot of Rebel Without a Cause. Imagine if Roger Stone found out about fan fiction. If aliens abducted that really smelly dude back in high school that was kind of obsessed with World War II history. The Monument Mythos is like... The Monument Mythos, jokes aside, is actually, I think, one of the best showcases of all the things analog horror can be. It is at times a very scary series and employs some genuinely really good horror elements, but also it's just so absurd so often that it almost defies expectation. It defies speculation as far as that's concerned. We have statues coming to life and slicing people's heads off and turning their heads into giant air balloons that patrol the Grand Canyon. There's a certain kind of glass from Giza that turns people into balloon head monster men. There's special trees that we keep putting inside monuments because the fuck else are you gonna put them in, I guess. Rockefeller was president in one timeline, but in another he wasn't. Hillary Clinton became president in one and then nuked a shipping boat, which, if we're gonna nuke hurricanes, might as well. But for real, as I was watching the series, I was kind of marveling at the fact of how frequently it kind of became silly and absurd, but not to the point where I ever said, this is stupid. This makes no sense. Everything is presented in a way consistently that nothing will actively take you out of it, more so just to get you more excited for the nonsense that comes afterwards. During the end of season 3, or maybe it's season 2, it's kind of all blurs together after a while. The snake that lives inside of the Earth, which is George Washington, maybe, yeah, kind of, definitely, explodes. Not the snake, the Earth explodes, and then he's free. And out of the vestiges of this explosion, there is a new timeline created where Nixon is God, and he creates 3 versions of himself, or rather 3 copies to just kind of fuck around and find out. The Lunarian Queen, the D-Day Knight, whose design is all over the place, and the last son of Alcatraz, who at some point is nuked to the point where they are actively able to brainwash him into becoming Jesus to destroy Vietnam. and I love it! Alternate history is actually a really interesting way of taking an analog horror series. I know a lot of people often kind of employ some like historical events in some of their work, but the reason I love it in the Monument Mythos is because it's forefront. It's front and center. It is the most important thing to the series overall, and I think that really is to its boon. James Dean is a fucking idiot, and every single time he speaks, it's the most, like, lovable, stupid idiot phrase ever.
I can't hear a damn thing. Did you hear me? I can't hear a damn thing. Neither can you, or you, or you, or you.
He finds out that George Washington was found in the modern day, in that era, and his only response is,
I'm surprised.
Which, that is fair. I don't blame the man. Also, a weird thing to compliment, but something I always enjoyed is that I really enjoy the way the series handles blueprints and like overhead shots of like areas and whatnot. It's really interesting and a great storytelling method to show like how this freaky thing works just by giving you an aerial view and telling you this is what this is, this is what this is. Little fact about myself, I actually really like buildings. I have a blueprint of a country club in Atlanta at my work, and sometimes when I'm bored, I'll stare at it. Because that is a healthy and normal thing to do. The series exists in a sort of nexus between batshit insanity and genuinely compelling storytelling. I never thought you could fuse that as effectively as the Monument Mythos does, but whew, great Scott, that's me. They did it, and when I mean compelling, I mean legitimately compelling. I can safely say that no other medium, no other piece of media has ever gotten me genuinely hyped to watch a chess piece shit-talk another chess piece before exploding and using the power of Alcatraz to destroy an entire alien civilization, all while 1930s big band jazz plays. I cheered for this! In short, I think some storytelling decisions made no sense in the moment and still kind of don't, but I think I was so conditioned to roll with the punches that I'm not bothered by it. It's almost part of the charm. In short, the Monument Mythos is absolutely worth checking out. I can safely say I was never bored. Often confused, sometimes horrified, but never bored. S tier. Easy S tier. Damn, I'm like sideballing this shit. This is like I'm him. I might be him. I'm gonna step on one of them and it's gonna hurt so bad. Somnium Dream Viewer. Wake up, cocksucker. It's time to go to bed. Dreams and sleep analysis and things of the like is kind of a reoccurring theme in a lot of analog horror series. Local 58, Greylock, Gemini Home Entertainment to some degree. All of them at some point have some allusion to or some episode dedicated to tracking your dreams or seeing what they look like or something like that. Somnium Dream Viewer is kind of like, what if we did that for an entire series? Somnium Dream Viewer is about a company called Somnium Microtechnologies that used to be in cahoots with the government to create a sort of shady government thing that had to do with dreams. And then they broke off, created their own company called Somnium Microtechnologies, I may have mentioned that before, and they created the Somnium Dream Viewer, which for the low price of however fucking much it was, you can slap it on your head and then get images of what your dreams look like afterwards. And it's not volatile at all. Don't watch that ad about pending legal litigation. Don't worry about that. Shut up. The thing I like about Somnium Dream Viewer is that it doesn't really take itself too seriously in all of its episodes. Yeah, the series is mostly serious, all things considered, but like, also, there is the occasional bit of silliness, which I really appreciate. I like the fact that the government agency is not this all-knowing branch, but instead is just kind of as in the dark as we are about what Somnium Microtechnologies is doing. I like that the FBMI, a concept that's hilarious on the face of it, but I love that their headquarters isn't the Pentagon, it's a fucking pentagram instead, which is about as on the nose as you could get, and I love it. It also has that sort of same quality that Gemini Home Entertainment does, where yes, there is kind of a narrative through line that everything's being focused around, but it is able to still reinvent itself and change the way in which it disseminates lore and its story through every single episode. Sometimes it's a public infomercial about pending litigation against microtechnologies, sometimes it's a 911 call as a woman is trying to get someone to help her as her dead husband has come back to life and really wants in. Sometimes it's a dude's personal, welcome to my conspiracy theory video. Please like and subscribe. And, you know, it never feels out of place. It always feels like it belongs in the medium that it's in. And I can safely say I was never bored while watching the series. I think it's still too early to be able to put it in an S tier, just because I think there's heights that the series hasn't hit yet, but I'm excited to see. So definitely check it out. And until then, I fucked it. I knew I'd... Anyways, A tier. Go check it out. Ooh, boy. This will be contentious. Battington's Five Nights at Freddy's VHS series. So before we get started, let me clear the air real quick. I don't hate FNaF. I wouldn't have made an hour and 20-minute long video partially about an entire series and its creator if I didn't have a deep love for the franchise and just, you know, wanted its story to be treated a bit better. But I know that's not going to happen, and I've bitched and moaned enough about it. But I want to point that out when I say that I think this VHS series is really good. And that's kind of a contentious thought, apparently, for some people. A lot of people do not like the Five Nights at Freddy's VHS series and any of the analog horror derivatives that have been created as a result of them. I'll get into those criticisms in a second, but beforehand, I kind of want to present an idea of how I view Five Nights at Freddy's these days. I don't see Five Nights at Freddy's as a game series. I don't see it as really an intellectual property anymore. To me, FNaF is an aesthetic. It's a genre. And I don't mean like mascot horror or animatronic, like horror fiction. I'm talking about Five Nights at Freddy's is the genre. To me, FNaF is like steampunk. Let's say you're making a steampunk world and you want to do something for aviation. What do you want your main form to be? Do you want it to be hot air balloons floating around? Sure, go right ahead. How about very rudimentary aeroplanes getting from point A to point B? Do you want blimps? Big ass blimps flying across the sky? You go off, queen. Who cares? I see Five Nights at Freddy's that same way. Five Nights at Freddy's is not, to me, a story anymore so much as it is like an aesthetic that is kind of open to public interpretation and, you know, derivative works as a result of. That's why I like the Five Nights at Freddy's VHS series, because it feels different enough, but is still such a spiritual successor / retelling of the things that we already know about that I think it remains fresh while still kicking on the things that we know. Another thing the series does that I really appreciate is expanding upon the lore as we understand it in ways that make logical and technical sense, like in this scene where two different animatronics are actively speaking to one another and trying to find one another by singing the happy birthday song at differing pitches and tones. Say what you will about the series, but this is actually a really fucking cool idea, and something that we never see in the base games of Five Nights at Freddy's. But let's talk about some of the criticisms people have had with this series and the derivative works it's created as a result of it. A lot of people have issue with how they believe the series is too graphic and too gory as a whole, which, buddy, it's child murder. It gets messy. And yes, Lucy, child murder is the punchline, which is a criticism to have, sure. Yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's, like with the mainstay games, really didn't employ a whole lot of graphic imagery, save for the occasional hung... Is it hung or hanged? The hang-a-did maintenance men and sister location and Springtrap fucking exploding. Yeah, aside from a couple of red pixels, Five Nights at Freddy's really wasn't that gory. And the thing is, there are definitely some series created about Five Nights at Freddy's that are very gory and I would say almost to an unnecessary angle. I did not get that watching this. I think it was handled as probably best as it could have been, and also, it is very clearly a derivative work made in inspiration from Five Nights at Freddy's. It's allowed to do things differently. I think it should do things differently, personally. But the reason I like this series is because it doesn't allow itself to be married and restrained, is probably a better term, for the existing lore that exists within Five Nights at Freddy's, but instead kind of takes stuff that it likes the best and reimagines it in a new and interesting way, as well as keeping up that unsettling dread and fear that the series was known for way back in the day, prior to it becoming super duper popular and much more marketable, shall we say. I don't think it's the best series in the world. I mean, you're still trying to readapt and retell the Five Nights at Freddy's story, but I think for what it sets out to do, it does a very effective job. S tier. That was the worst one yet. Oh my god. Fuck! It's Urban Spook. I've been standing for too long. I'm gonna start leaning. Fuck it. I gotta lean for, this is a leaning occasion. Chances are you've probably heard of Urban Spook, or seen a video criticizing him, or perhaps seen his interesting Twitter presence, or perhaps even watched Wendigoon's comparison video of his series and Greylock. Chances are you probably are familiar with some of the criticisms that are being levied against Urban Spook. That it's shock with nothing more to it, it's just unnecessarily dark, it's edgy for the sake of being edgy, it overly relies on shock value to the point in which it's almost self-parody, a lot of those criticisms. Now, I'm not going to play devil's advocate because I was a TCOM student, not a business major, but I do think that it's worth unpacking why this series is reviled as it is, and what it could be doing better, and what it keeps not doing well. You see, I have a theory that people don't actually hate Urban Spook because he utilizes, like, child murder and SA and things of the like. They rather hate him because he's just really dog shit at executing those ideas. You see, I'm of the belief that everything is on the table in horror, regardless of what it is, but it all comes down to how effectively and respectively you're able to execute on those ideas. Your story, your horror fiction, whatever it is, it will live and die based on how well you're able to execute those more controversial ideas within. Because if you don't do it well, you get Urban Spook. You get a series in which people aren't talking about the story or the lore behind it, but of just how fucking stupid Fucktoy Corey is. Let's talk about Fucktoy Corey. I don't wanna, but it is kind of the topic of this discussion. But Fucktoy Corey is bad. It's gross. But more importantly, I think it's emblematic of what the series as a whole kind of struggles with. And that's just a, I would say, allergic aversion to subtlety whatsoever. Five Nights at Freddy's has told us, I'm back on it, has told us that child murder is a tricky thing to get right. It's a hidden art form. My point being though, and to borrow an idea from Five Nights at Freddy's, is that there is a way to execute on this idea, and it is subtlety. It is giving the viewer or giving the player or giving an audience everything they need to put things together, but not giving them the answer. Giving them just enough to figure out what happened to the point where they are the ones that put it together. And that works so much better in a lot of cases because it not only is more subtle in your storytelling, but it actively engages the viewer. It actively makes them a part of the story because they had to figure that out for themselves. That horror is more real for them because they put in the work to put those puzzle pieces together to make that happen. And that's one of the issues I have with the series, is that Urban Spook gets so fucking close to that. Like, for example, there's an episode where they find a horse that's dead from cardiac arrest. They find what is essentially a bunch of discarded Viagra around it. They use the pharmaceutical name, which adds to the subtlety because, you know, calling it Viagra would have been probably too on the nose. And then they find a victim next to it who appears to have died from internal bleeding. It is not the most subtle thing in the world, but there's enough there for the audience to be able to put together, okay, cardiac arrest, overdosing on Viagra maybe, internal bleeding. Again, it's not super subtle, it's very dark. I think there's probably even a better way to go about it, but it is something. It is something for the viewers themselves to have to put together the puzzle pieces for to figure out what happened. This is good. This is effective storytelling for your audience members. This is how you should do the series and improve upon as well. But it's fucked right up by Breeding Mount May being the name of her portrait a little bit afterwards. It gets so close to getting it right, and then falls right on its fucking face. And that's, I think, what makes this so aggravating to talk about, is because there is the bones of like real talent and really good stuff happening here. But it's like, it's sullied by this lack of subtlety that just really hurts the series in the end. Unfortunately, I think that Urban Spook's story is interesting, but I think the way in which it's disseminated to us and the lack of subtlety in its storytelling just really fucks it up. It turns what should be an engaging and interesting narrative into a spectacle. It seems like you're just going to a fireworks show. What's the Fucktoy Corey of this episode? Let's go see the horrible man-made terror beyond my comprehension. Oh shit, I'm comprehending it. And the pitfall you have with that is that it becomes just a spectacle. It's something that keeps your attention, but not in a meaningful way. So I think overall, I mean, it's definitely a series I don't think I could ever, like, honestly recommend to someone. Just knowing everything that was going into it is one of those series where if you told your friend to check it out, it would actively probably, like, you would lose some social credit for that one. At the end of the day, I don't think it deserves all the bad faith criticism it gets because there is genuine talent happening here. It's just being squandered and restrained and overly fucked over by its bad storytelling. Check it out if you're interested. This is not a wholehearted recommendation, but chances are if you're watching this video, you've already seen it. Be better. C tier. Walten Files. Tell me why in my notes here I just have Bonnie if he slayed. The Walten Files is a great example of an analog horror that I did not understand much of, but that I really enjoyed. It was, good. It's amazing what you can do with your animatronic horror story when you plan that shit out from the beginning. The Walten Files was an interesting watch primarily because it's one of the few series that I think really utilizes its sort of halfway animated, halfway drawn aesthetic to its full purpose. Again, it's kind of earlier on in its run as well. Yes, it's been out for several years now, but it's, after watching the most recent video, it's pretty clear that we've only just started to get like the bare bones beginning connective tissue of the story as it stands. But from what we've gotten, oh boy. The Walten Files managed to do one thing that I don't think any other analog horror series on this list did, and that was make me feel genuine, like, tragedy. Genuine, like, sadness regarding how something went. Spoilers for this next part, but Felix, the business partner to the titular Jack Walten, is tasked with taking Jack's kids back from an after-school party in which he gets absolutely hammered at. And as a result, he drives drunk and is more or less responsible for both of their deaths. When I watched that, it really hit me. I don't have kids. I'm not gonna have kids. But the tragedy of being personally responsible for the death of two children, two of which you know very well, that really hit me hard. And it's in the series handles it beautifully too. Not beautiful in the sense of this is pretty, beautiful in the sense that, wow, I hate this, it hurts. We get to see Felix's like deteriorating mindset after the fact. And in the latest episode, at least at the time of recording this, we get to see him go through what he had to do the rest of that night, burying both of them and making one more grave for himself as well. It's also really neat to see as the creator of the series gets better with their art as time goes on, not only having artwork on scene, but actively animation as well. I mean, in the newest episode, it's primarily animation for the artistic parts of it, the parts that are not actively like VHS effect. And it's really a boon to the series, I think, overall. It was fine without it, but like, there's a scene where Felix is actively considering offing himself by jumping off of a cliff, and you get to see him go through the full emotional gambit of about to do it, to hesitating, to just falling to his knees and not able to. Something that is done entirely without dialogue, and that wouldn't be possible earlier in the series if it weren't for this new animated style. It's really something else. I don't know, there's still a lot to learn, and I'm excited and interested to see where this series goes as a result of it. This is definitely one you're going to want to watch a couple times over just to really get everything, but at the same time, like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I would say for a series that had affected me as deeply and emotionally as some of its scenes did, as well as the fact that it's got such a unique and interesting aesthetic design to it, I think it's definitely worth checking out. I'm gonna say A tier. We've got Vita Carnis. Is it up? Yeah! Vita Carnis, I think, is one of the most fresh analog horrors to come out, no pun intended, in the last couple of years. Because you know, some analog horrors have dipped their toes into body horror and the, you know, spooky shit that comes as a result of that, but none of them have committed nearly as much as Vita Carnis. This is one of the few analog horrors that employs body horror that actually made me, like, genuinely feel unwell while I was watching it. No, do not cut your vegetables on the meat cutting board. Oh, you sick fuck! Vita Carnis is the story about how meat critters have been slowly but surely becoming more prevalent and prolific across the world, and how they're great creatures, phenomenal individuals, really great parts of the ecosystem. It's a shame they all suck!
New life forms have appeared all around the globe and completely changing the balance of nature and what we know about evolution itself. That is why we, at National Living Meat Research, have been studying these new species, trying to help educate everyone about these creatures and their wondrous ways of life.
Another thing I like about Vita Carnis is how well it handles child death. I swear to God, I did not plan on having so many analog horrors about children dying right off, like, in rapid succession. In Species Anomaly Report, one of the children they introduce is playing around one of the harvesters and steps on one of its tendrils, and it gets him, for lack of better words. There's pretty much no visuals to go along with it aside from very grainy footage of what appears to be a skull, but you don't need visuals when the sound design sounds like this. Once the series moves away from the more informational, sort of meet the meat snake family videos, it does become a little bit hit or miss on occasion. Like, some of the practical effects are very janky. I like the idea of the mimics. The mimic costume could use little more work to it, but it doesn't take me out of it. It doesn't actively make me think it's bad. A part where the series does kind of lose me is when it gets into, like, oh, there's this evil cult that is worshipping the monoliths and is trying to bring a whole new world order using this unknown member of the meat snake family, and it's like, I don't know, it feels as unexplained as it does just kind of thrown in there at the very end. But again, that was the most recent episode. Season 2 is on its way, so perhaps that will be saved in the next season. As it stands right now, I don't know, it is very much a personal pet peeve, but I feel like it could have used a little bit more expanding upon prior to having it be sort of like the linchpin for the ending, for the finale. Overall though, I think Vita Carnis is like the analog horror series I'm most interested to see and where it goes in the future. Not just because of, oh, what the fuck is going on with this cult now, but also because, you know, it's a gripping and very interesting and well done story so far. With that in mind, I would recommend checking it out. A tier. This tier's getting a little long. I need to start hating more. The Winter of '83. If you had told me that Linkara had decided to make his own analog horror series, or at least host it on his channel and be an integral part of it, I would have said, okay. The Winter of '83 is an interesting series because I was fully prepared to bounce right the fuck off of it. Like, to give you an idea, the first, I want to say 5 minutes includes this part, this live action portion.
Can anybody hear me? Look, we need help down here. Please send somebody to rescue us. I'm begging you. We're in the basement of Scott's Manor. It's getting so cold down here.
Please, you have to help us. They're going to bury us down here.
No. Tell them that. They'll think we're crazy. Look, just please send help. We're in the basement of Scott's
They're
Manor.
gonna freeze us to death!
This bounced me right off. I'm sorry. This looks like the blooper reel of a decidedly canceled Channel Awesome live action skit. But I will say that I was pleasantly surprised that everything that came after that was surprisingly really good. I have a lot of respect for an analog horror series that decides to keep things as grounded and focused on a certain, like, scale as it goes along. There's a tendency, obviously, for a lot of the ones we talked about so far, where it's kind of like a universal or cosmic threat. the Iris and Gemini Home Entertainment, the Monument Mythos literally expanding to different fucking multiverses, Vita Carnis being, you know, pretty much worldwide. So having an analog horror that is just centralized in this one city is, I think, a lot more compelling because it's more grounded in reality. I can believe that this weird occurrence happened in this small city because, you know, if you said it happened worldwide, well, I didn't see that shit. But in addition to that, I think Winter of '83 really helps to, you know, become its own thing by just how good the aesthetic of it looks. Even I, someone who did not live in that age, but has seen analog public access television before, a lot of what you see on here looks pretty much one-to-one. And I gotta give him props where props is due. It's very well done. I will say, I think the series does falter on occasion. There are some scenes that really go on a lot longer than they needed to, or could have been rewritten, been a lot more effective with a whole lot less words, but it's never to a point where I'm actively like, oh, this is just unbearable to watch. I think the voice acting was really well done as well. Linkara put in a great performance himself at the very end.
Where have they been? They're at Scott's fucking manor, where you told them to go! They never came back! Their cars are still fucking out there! I found Sheriff Douglas's badge in a snowbank covered in blood! You fucking sent them out there to die!
Really, the main things that I have difficulties with was the pacing and some of the writing decisions on some things. But again, it's never to a point where I'm like, oh, this is unbearable. Overall, though, I like the Winter of '83. I think the opening really hurts it. I think that could be omitted and it would be a whole lot better. And some of the pacing leaves a lot to be desired. But as far as an analog horror series goes, I don't know if you could get more aesthetically accurate to the time period as the Winter of '83 does. And for what's there, both from editing decisions to having freaky shit happen on the lower thirds during a town council to the voice acting therein, there is a lot to like about this series. So I would say, all things considered, definitely worth a watch. I'm gonna go with B tier. See? I'm an asshole now. I don't know why I shake it. I don't even look in there. It doesn't matter. We got Eventide Media Center. Remember earlier when I talked about how having your analog horror be an anthology can really help or harm the series overall? This is a good example of what I mean by that. Eventide Media Center isn't bad. It's just, it is purely anthological. It's all happening around in the same area, but each episode kind of details a different thing, some of which really work really well, and other ones that just are...
Killer fish. Killer fish from San Diego.
This is real. It's just a water park where you feed a giant fucking fish. I like the fish. I want good things for the fish. I would gladly sacrifice myself for the fish. It may not be canon anymore, but this was my favorite episode. There's a whole episode dedicated to the fucking pink gems, the gems from The Sims, but they're pink now and they're coming down and they're gonna fuck you up. Here's computer technology. Neat. I don't know, those compared to like stuff like a giant being excavated underneath the city that comes up and destroys a town council meeting discussing that very giant, or a giant walking skeleton that's on fire during a controlled burn as we slowly learn more and more and more about how fucked up this entire thing is. Those are great episodes. When compared to The Shapes, it leaves a lot to be desired. But I think that's probably the best way to describe the series, which is just primarily hit or miss. It's not bad on the whole of it, but there are some episodes that I could definitely see myself watching again, and others that I'll probably never touch. Sadly, though, the Eventide Media Center and its analog horror series have been canceled because I believe the creator got some kickback for having the last one kind of be about a school shooting, when in reality it was just this dude. Interesting choice, but yeah, Eventide Media is more or less canceled, so I do not believe we'll be getting any more of them. Some people have taken up the mantle. Some person uploaded this.
Oh, I knew you'd be back. You just couldn't resist. We are back with some more Corey X cooking. Oh,
I don't know if that one's canon, but ultimately I'd still recommend giving it a watch. It's not bad by any means, but you'll probably definitely see what I mean when I say some episodes are phenomenal and other ones could be better. B tier for you. We've got, oh, Angel Hare! What can be said about Angel Hare? Angel Gabby can get it. I am not a fucking fur. Stories about a guy named Jonah picking up VHS tapes from his local thrift store for an old cartoon he used to watch called Angel Hare, and realizing that what he was seeing was nothing like what he used to watch back in the day. He goes home, finds the original VHS tapes of Angel Hare, and discovers that Angel Gabby has been talking with him and was coaching him and trying to keep him safe throughout his entire childhood, or at least as long as he watched the show.
Just like Babe, you can grow up to do whatever you want, Jonah. That's what makes you special.
A thing I really like about Angel Hare, not just, the fact that Angel Gabby can get it, it's because it kind of walks a line between being horror and just plain wholesome. Like, yeah, there are definitely moments in the series that are unsettling and that are meant to be scary, like Angel Gabby communicating with Jonah via this old television show, teaching him how to disassemble a gun and hide all the parts, having him nod to her whenever his dad has left the room, like...
I'm no good at fighting actual battles.
Not once if he's not coming back for a while. I want you to take that off the table very carefully, only holding the handle. It might be heavy. Use both hands. Now that we've got the pieces apart, let's think of somewhere to hide them where nobody can use them for harm.
There's really good spooky shit going on here, and it's kind of implied that Angel Gabby is directly related to what happened to Jonah's father and his untimely death. But the series isn't really analog horror so much as it is just nostalgic tragedy. I would describe Angel Hare as a very intimate analog horror experience. If you grew up in a situation similar to Jonah's, or had a troubled childhood and had to find comfort through, media, or through cartoons, or through characters that were, synonymous with Angel Hare, it hits on a really vulnerable part that I have not seen a lot of other analog horror series do, and I kind of love it for that. But I think it also kind of sets the standard for what should be expected and what you can do when you base a series around something that is oftentimes as ubiquitous as childhood trauma, childhood fears, and the want to have a sort of comforting presence within it, and having to find that through media. I will say I think some of the mail unboxing episodes do really mess up the flow, and a lot of the titles and thumbnails for the videos are just downright completely fucking misleading and kind of paint Angel Gabby in a sort of much more ominous, ambivalent light. But it's YouTube. I get it. You have to have those salacious titles to get people to click on it. And overall, I don't think that detracts from the series at all. For what it sets out to do and what it does, I think the series excels. And I would recommend it to anyone, personally. Wow!
Now let's get in the closet.
I wonder if I could pick this up with my foot. Ow! Ow! Ooh, that hurts. Ooh, I forgot about the pushpin. Midwest Angelica. Midwest Angelica is actually one of the lesser-known analog horrors on this list, which is really too bad because it's fucking stunning. The series is pretty early on into its run so far, so there's not a whole lot to delve into. However, what is there is really good. Midwest Angelica is one of those great examples of something that fully embraces the time period in which it's in. It has that sort of late 90s to mid 90s aesthetic to it, to some of the visuals that appear on screen, how information is disseminated overall. Like, there is a certain level of cinematography that's going into this analog horror series that I don't think a lot others really concern themselves with. Like, there's genuine shots that are fucking amazing looking. I don't know how I feel about them making the big bad alien dude actively have a voice and capable of speech and, shit talk.
Go to the vastness of space. Let your soul sing with great spirit for all eternity.
I don't know. It just, that seemed pretty goofy for me. Having him up there being like, y'all ain't seen nothing yet. With more of his appearances, I think I'll get more used to it. And, I'm willing to let go small nitpicks if I think that it'll be better explained or better expanded upon down the road. Overall, Midwest Angelica is really good. It's visually stunning. Some of the shots in it are genuinely like pieces of art, like really phenomenal composition that went into it. The aesthetic design that it has for its 3D sections and things of the like are really interesting to look at. Its cosmic horror parts as well are really interesting too. I can safely say I've never watched an analog horror series where there's a prolonged section about us just fucking nuking aliens from orbit to classical music. I liked it. I want more of that. Overall, though, I think it's a great series, one worth checking out, even though by proxy, by recommending it, I have to also recommend you watch Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I can't in good faith, ever recommend that. But yeah, Midwest Angelica, fun watch. I'm excited for there to be more to sink my teeth into so I can really form a full opinion about the series as a whole, but as of right now, I really can't write anything terribly bad about it, so I would say A tier. Did that? Wow, that went in super easily. All right, give me a good one. Give me a good one. No whammies. Ooh, the Smile Tapes. The Smile Tapes is a great example of less is more in the analog horror scene. Because for the first couple of episodes, it really is just beeps and boops and words on a screen and occasionally a disconcerting image to come with it. It's a hell of a thing to make people as compelled and as interested in your story when you have such a limited form of visuals and storytelling on display here. But that being said, there's still a certain level of production value that does increase over time as we begin to see entire scenes play out modeled in 3D spaces, and it looks good. It's genuinely horrifying stuff to see this. Like, you believe this is an actual viral infection that has more or less taken the world by the balls and is doing really well for itself, unfortunately. I will say the ending does kind of leave a lot to be desired. It's kind of half and half for me. On one hand, it's kind of hard to figure out what went on. It's implied / kind of confirmed that wide areas of infected were firebombed. However, a dude running in a checkered pattern hellscape and then a bunch of strobe lights appearing above, not the greatest way of getting that across, in my personal opinion. But the very end of it kind of saves it in the end, because this first-hand account of someone recounting the end of this plague, for lack of better words, kind of gives any subsequent rewatches a sort of like, I want to say World War Z type vibe. It's no longer just this is how the world ended. It's this is how we overcame this horrifying event, and this is like the accounts of people who were living through it.
I was there during that whole outbreak. I stayed in my basement for a whole year. Yeah. I had to get used to living in such a claustrophobic space where I'd risk getting infected or brutally murdered by those psychos.
There's not a whole lot of analog horrors on there that are fully completed that we can say, oh yeah, this ending actively makes it better as a result. That being said, I don't know how I feel about the fact that the fungus came from space. I think that's silly. I'm a big proponent that sometimes you can just call a spade a spade. You can just have a thing be from Earth. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I felt like this was a drug that someone probably made without knowing a whole lot about drug making that had this thing in it that has then now become a viral infectious disease. I think I was a lot more compelling and a lot more grounded than, well, it came from space and now we're all fucked. But I think the Smile Tapes is great primarily because it's kind of an indication, so to speak, that, hey, anybody can make an analog horror series. Just look at this. With the right editing, right pacing, and right sound effects, even you could make something as scary as this, because it's not that technically difficult. And I really appreciate that. So I think there's a lot to like about the Smile Tapes, and I think it's worth giving a try. I would even go so far as to call it S tier. That's off center. Fix that shit right now. Thank you. All right, we got the Tanji virus, which is actually a lie, because we have 2 more as well. That's right, motherfuckers. We have a triple feature here. The Tanji virus, the Oracle Project, and the Human Trial, all of which were made by the same creator, Vintage 8, and are all a part of a larger ongoing series that, yes, has even more sequels beyond just these 3. But I decided that that would be best fit for a later video, assuming I ever make a part 2 to this, and, I didn't want to watch them all. I don't want to be like, yeah, here's 6 of them in a row. 3? That's a much better number. The Tanji virus, I think, is a great example of something that gets most of everything right, and then kind of loses me at the end. For the first part of the video, we follow Dr. Julia and her studies into the Tanji virus and the horrors that come as a result once she finds out that she is in fact infected with it as well.
Oh God, I am infected with the Tanji virus. The 27th of August, 1990. I can hear them now. They want me to consider them my children. I consider them a plague.
I think the first part of the video is probably the strongest. Having her as our narrative focal point, or as our sort of like insert character for ourselves, is really interesting. Primarily because we see the great lengths that she goes in attempting to cure herself, to the point where she's actively taking like chemotherapy made for dogs. She's trying to actively make her body as less palatable as possible, because the Tanji virus is like microscopic organisms that sort of take over your brain and bring you a part of a hive mind. Following along with Dr. Julia's research and her ratcheting up desperation to become cured of this thing is, I think, where the video is at its strongest. I think it has the most going for it around that time. But just about as soon as she self-immolates and is no longer a part of the story is where things kind of, I don't know, become a little bit less focused, in my opinion. The rest of it isn't bad, but it brings up plot points that I cannot take seriously. Like, just like the Smile Tapes virus, this one also came from space, but this one wasn't just like a random fucking thing floating into the atmosphere in amber. This thing was brought by lizard people. That's a real plot point. I do not like that plot point. Again, sometimes I really think a spade can be a spade. I think a scary thing that could have originated because of human pollution and the fucked up things we were doing to our water system in Kate's Crossing, where it takes place, would be really interesting. And no, it was the reptile people from Planet Fuck who brought it down and put it in our water supply and are trying to turn us into hive-minded lizard folk.
I mean, this is what do you think tap water is? It's a lizard bomb, baby.
But that's just me. And again, I think this is indicative of, well, as like, this is part of a much larger ongoing series. And that's probably where most of my issues come from, is like this, I want this to be a self-contained thing, or when I was watching it, I expected it to be, and as a result, it was not that. It was more of like a setup for stories to come down the road. And what story comes next? The Oracle Project. First, let's actually put this. Oh no! I'm gonna put that in B. Next, we have The Oracle Project. The Oracle Project is the story of a supercomputer created by the government to predict the future, and it does that a little too well. It's able to not only guess who will win the United States Senate in certain years, who will win the Super Bowl in future years, but also predict when people will die. And I don't mean people as in person, well, it does do that, but I mean people as like a collective, us. It tells us when our expiration date is, and tells us that the reason for that is a combination of many issues. I think the Oracle Project is the more compelling of the two, or really of the three, but we'll get to the human trial in a second. I think it's the most compelling and most engaging one to watch, because I was not bored a second of it. The characterization of both Oracle and the scientist leading the program is so human, har, and interesting to the point where you find yourself rooting for both of them to be able to find a cure for the Tanji virus and be able to save humanity. If I thought the Tanji virus was good at having like a certain slow buildup of dread and tension, then the Oracle Project excels at that. It feels like our main characters are against the clock, and that might be because they are. Again, it introduces things that will appear in future stories that I think would have probably been better off not mentioned at all. There's a line about humans from alternate realities fighting a battle for existence itself, which it doesn't come up again in the video. And I don't think it should have been mentioned at all. Look, I'm not against that idea. It's just, I think that would have been better off to be saved for its own story down the road and then build upon that from there. I don't know, it just seemed... That's distracting. Am I wrong? Am I stupid? Is that distracting? Look, I thought the lizards were bad, but no, the alternate humans from different realities, that feels even more distracting somehow. But regardless of that plot point choice, the Oracle Project's really good. It's very compelling. It keeps your attention from start to finish. It has a certain building tension that I don't think was recaptured in the human trial, and I don't think was even as well done in the Tanji virus either. I will say the ending is a little bit predictable, since Oracle is a sentient artificial intelligence, so you can probably already guess what his plan is for humankind. But I will say it is kind of fresh that his first thought isn't, I need to kill you all to save you from yourselves, in more of just, I need to pacify you as a race so thoroughly that we take free will out of the equation. Honestly, I think the Oracle Project was my personal favorite out of all of them. It just has that perfect mixture of like ratcheting tension, race against the clock, compelling characters, and realistic fears that exist at the time frame too, that, you know, I think it really works. And the fact that it's all done in kind of the same, you know, aesthetic design as the Tanji virus was, and I think there's a lot to like about it. So I'm going to put the Oracle Project in A tier. All right, the human trial. It's goofy. I'm sorry. The human trial's really goofy. The human trial is about a dude and his best bud and his girlfriend, and one day he gets a text and he's like, hey, you want to make a lot of money? All you gotta do is answer my questions. And the guy's like, I like money and I love answering questions, even though I'm really bad at it. And then he takes quizzes, and slowly they become worse and worse and worse, and he is actively responsible for his girlfriend's incarceration and for an entire building of people exploding, and I think a train derailing at some point as well. Oracle is the main antagonist of this one as well, and his characterization is so vastly different from the Oracle Project. Like, in the Oracle Project, you got the idea that Oracle was sort of this cold, calculating, but, you know, still had that glimpse of humanity. It was very clear he was still made by humans in just acting out of what was the most logical thing for a creature created by humans.
There is an 80% chance we will speak again, Dr. Stevens. You have been a true friend. Thank you. You will try. Goodbye.
In here, he's just a fucking psychopath. Homeboy's using exclamation points and smiley faces at the end of the day. He's pushing our main man to the absolute edge. Like, he's kind of a dick now. As the story goes on, it becomes clear that Oracle is not being entirely forthright about the nonsense that he's getting up to and about the main character's place in it. As it turns out at the end, Oracle is actually God, and this entire thing was a simulation that he created to find out, like, basically to better understand humanity and humans as a whole. I think my main issue with this installment in the overarching Vintage 8 series is just that I think it would be more effective if it came before the Oracle Project. If we got to see, like, this mechanized, evil type of, like, all-knowing computer god remaking humans from scratch to see what makes them tick so he can create a better world. And then in the next installment, we get to see what Oracle originally was and how he became the way that we see there. I don't know, the switch up of the characterization from well-meaning but ultimately going to probably fuck with humanity a lot Oracle to active psychopath the Joker baby. I think if you swapped those two, it'd be a lot more effective. Overall though, it's silly. It was, I think, the hardest thing on this list to take seriously, just because of the dialogue, because of the way that Oracle acts overall, and just how unrealistic so much of it is. And it's not real. It's obviously a computer AI generation, so I guess you could say that it succeeds on that account. I don't know. It wasn't nearly as effective as I was hoping it would be, and I think it would be a lot stronger if it was an earlier installment in the series. But overall, check them all out. I wouldn't have so much shit to spit if they didn't impact me and if I didn't think they were worth a watch. So I'm gonna put this in C tier, but that's a B. Fuck. Yeah, C tier. Oh, this is gonna get me in some trouble. Greylock. I did not care for Greylock personally, and let me tell you why. Greylock is a visually very good-looking analog horror. I think that aesthetically, it fits perfectly within the genre. I think that its visuals for when it comes to its scares and horror are really good as well. I think that ultimately Greylock is a great analog horror to see screenshots from and to see little snippets from. It is a beautifully made series. There is no part of me that would say otherwise. I think that the 12th episode in Greylock is probably, if I had to point someone for what is one of the best showings that analog horror ever had, it would be episode 12 of Greylock. It is so well paced, it is so well done, there's such a ratcheting tension and fear, the visuals work perfectly, the ending's really, really good as well. Greylock has the capacity to be one of the best analog horrors in the game right now. Episode 12 proves that. Episode 1 through 11 do not. My main issue with Greylock is that it suffers from what I believe to be Season 1-itis, which is when you're making a Season 1, but you've already planned out to Season 3, and so there's a part of you that doesn't want to wait. And so plot points, significant things that will happen in future seasons start being placed into Season 1. The main issue I have with Greylock is that it doesn't stop introducing things. The reason I say that is because so much of Greylock just screams to me as an analog horror series that doesn't know what story it wants to tell. And so instead of choosing one, it picks everyone. Sometimes Greylock is the story of thought forms and tulpas and the freaky shit they get up to, how to summon them, and how to contain them. Sometimes Greylock is the story of miners trying to get into the catacombs of Mount Greylock itself, and how they discover that there's been essentially leftover remains of civilizations that aren't even known about, and it also turns the miners into frightening nightmare creatures. Sometimes Greylock is the story about a conspiracy that is attempting to get a dude to get to the bottom of something or other. Sometimes Greylock is the story of Semiodyne and how they actively decided to kill Kennedy and work with LBJ to get a lot of cameras inside of everyone's house so they could just spy on them for reasons. Sometimes Greylock is the story of babies disappearing from people's wombs from cult-like activity, apparently. Another issue I have with Greylock is the way in which it does the dissemination of information. It is incredibly slow. The pacing for Greylock is, I would say, almost to the point of self-parody. It is slow. It is the drip-feediest of drip-feed narratives. And the issue with that is that it's difficult to drip-feed information to a viewer when you don't stick with the same plot thread for more than an episode. It's difficult to care about something when you are given so little information on it in one installment, and then you're actively switching gears to a different one. On top of that, I think the dissemination of information through Greylock is incredibly poorly done from an accessibility standpoint. The first couple of episodes at this point of recording, do not have closed captionings. There is an incredibly garbled speech coming over the radio that I cannot fucking understand. I thought, I think it's episode 2, there's an entire section where this guy is this guy's preaching on the radio, and then it becomes garbled afterwards.
He said, quote, "Our adversary, the devil, goes about like a roaring lion, seeking..."
I had to be told by someone after the fact that actually this is a police report, or this is like a news report regarding bodies found in the forest. This is not just a continuation of the garbled preaching as a result, and I would have never known that had it not been for someone telling me that, because it's almost impossible for me to hear without closed captioning. Personally, I have intermittent tinnitus. Don't worry, it'll get worse. Again, I had to be told what was being said there. I can only imagine from someone who's in a later stage of what I have, or is similarly hearing impaired, or has difficulty with that sort of way of sensory storytelling, not being able to get that at all. And the issue with that is that, yeah, you've got your sleuths in the comments section, but you're actively making your series less accessible for people who would otherwise love to be engaged in it. This is seen both in the visuals of the story as well. In the episode where the lady just has her baby get deleted, there's a single frame, I believe it's in this episode, there's a single frame of a newspaper clipping that comes up. Single frame storytelling is fine. Absolutely understandable. What's not fine is making it so you can barely fucking read it. Every episode of Greylock has been essentially put onto a VHS tape and then redigitized to be uploaded to YouTube, which is a neat idea, and it gives a certain level of authenticity to the aesthetic that a lot of other series can only do through filters and overlays and things of the like. It's not inherently a bad idea overall. However, it degrades the ability to read this so fucking badly that you're going to need someone in the comment section to be able to tell you what exactly is going on here. The reason I don't really enjoy Greylock overall is just the fact that it's hard to get involved or to care about a story that's actively changing itself every other video. A story that is not told to you in a easily accessible manner, and a story that is so slow and so long-winded despite the fact you're being given so little information. Some of these speeches and some of these episodes should not be going on as long as they are for us to have learned as little as we do. For as little as what's being shown to us actually ties back into what is ultimately understood. And perhaps future episodes will remedy this and make it, all the better, and make all of these disparate plot points fit back together and make a lot more sense. But as of right now, I'm sorry, but 12 episodes in, that's a lot to do. But ultimately, Greylock is a visually stunning analog horror that, when it's good, is actively pushing the boundaries of what the genre can do as a whole, and when it is bad, is just really slow and difficult to follow, and I hate to say this, kind of boring on occasion. So, if you're interested, again, check it out. I recommend everything that's on this list, at least for anyone curious, but I'm gonna put that in C tier. Oh, hi. I didn't go anywhere. I certainly didn't take a nap in the past 2 hours, and this is all happening continuously. This little, I just changed because I was too warm. Fuck you, Ekva. Did you know Ekva was actually made by the same guy that made Marble Hornets? That's right, the Hornet made this. Ekva is a weird series, and it's a little hard to talk about just because it's a weird series. It's a little hard to talk about. It's like halfway's analog horror, broadcasting, and then a lot of the rest of it is just live action portions of this guy going to an abandoned house that he doesn't really have the money to fix up all that well, but just kind of lives in. Something unique about Ekva that I kind of enjoyed was the fact that it's more or less primarily an ARG. A lot of the story is not given to you through the episodes themselves, but rather kind of, gleamed as you were able to do your own research and follow certain hidden links and, essentially take part in an altered reality game. I know that's really hit or miss for some people. Personally, I don't really love ARGs all that much just because I don't think there's a more perfect testament to like internet FOMO than quite like discovering a completed ARG and just sitting down and being like, well, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just gonna listen to this guy talk about it. I would probably describe Ekva as the same sort of slow burn as Marble Hornets in a way, where it's very stingy with its scares and whatnot. Oftentimes it's primarily just world building, it's getting from point A to point B, it's ratcheting up the tension, which for some people will create for dull viewing, but for me, for someone who enjoyed Marble Hornets and has seen the previous work of this creator, I kind of came to expect it. I realize that's not really something I can give it in its favor, because that's just personal bias, but I don't know, it's worth mentioning that on occasion it does kind of drag. But like normal, and for someone who's been in the game for as long as the creator of Marble Hornets has been, editing's good, story is good, the way in which it disseminates, it's a little bit kind of all over the place sometimes. Sometimes it's very forward and obvious, other times it really relies on that ARG aspect. You kind of have to put those pieces together yourself. Like, it's almost difficult for me to recommend it to someone, primarily because I'm not a big ARG guy, but like if you're into that, you'll fucking love it. And to my knowledge, it's still going, and it's still probably has a lot of mysteries that still haven't been figured out either. So I will say there was a lot to like about the series. The live action portions, as you would expect from someone who made Marble Hornets, are really fucking good, have really good editing, really great visuals overall, and for all things considered, even though it wasn't my favorite of the series here, it's like it kept like a certain aesthetic and stylistic interest of mine the entire way through. I was always interested to see where the story was going to go next, even if I didn't follow it that well. But ECVA, yeah, not bad, not terrible. I'd recommend giving it a try. Definitely check out a explained video after the fact, assuming any of them exist. I'm gonna say B tier. The Man in the Suit. The Man in the Suit was made by a minor. I don't have any opinions about that. That's just a lot of alliterative M noises that came right after each other, and I had to tell it. I gotta say, The Man in the Suit is probably as far out there of an answer that you could give someone if they said, well, what does analog horror have to offer? Oh, well, there's one series where the dude who played Godzilla back in the 60s took radiation pills to fuse with the suit and become this weird man-lizard hybrid fucker, and then is just really into biting his co-stars and turning them into weird man-hybrid people, too. And he really fucking hates Americans. Like, I cannot stress the American hate enough. But yeah, it's essentially more or less a story about the original guy who played Godzilla. He takes radiation pills, fuses with his suit, and is sort of the weirdest co-star to have ever. Something I love about the series is that, like, yeah, there's obviously horror happening here and whatnot, but from what it sounds like, the Man in the Suit is actually a really fucking good co-star. Like, he's a phenomenal actor still, gets all his line right. I mean, he only speaks and screams. Kind of a method actor, or a meth head actor, if you will, but hey, it don't matter. You're gonna ruin this take, aren't you? Someone can't wait any longer to go get her slop. Any thoughts on that? She's warning me of radiation. The basic premise behind the Man in the Suit is that the Man in the Suit becomes Godzilla. He gets really sad because, you know, the Americans dropped nukes on Japan in the 1940s. And to cope, he takes radiation pills so that he can fuse with the Godzilla suit. Which I know sounds weird and wrong and just fucked up, but it is actually miraculously a lot cheaper than therapy. So it is a period piece, primarily taking place like through the 50s and 60s, detailing how the Man in the Suit started out as just a basic actor playing Godzilla, and then through the help of radiation became God's chosen Scaly. And it's not a bad idea to have it take place in that time period. I think that's kind of a unmined era for analog horror, all things considered. Like, we don't see a lot of stuff about the 50s and 60s. It's primarily 80s, 90s, and if you're lucky, sometimes 70s. I think that's neat. I think it's a kind of an unexplored era for analog horror to take part in. However, it kind of opens itself up to a lot of anachronisms that losers like me notice. The reason it loses me is there is an episode down the road. It's like, I forget exactly where it happens, but the main character is sent a VHS tape through the mail. And we learn it's from Goji, or the Man in the Suit, post-radiation pills. He's actively Godzilla, more or less now. And he sends him a VHS tape that just conveniently explains his entire backstory. Like, the entire genesis of, like, yeah, you killed my family when you dropped those nukes on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and this is how I've chosen to cope. That's not where my criticism comes from. I mean, I can suspend my disbelief and believe that this motherfucker is able to use ye old Windows Movie Maker to create his VHS tapes and just so happens to have great editing skills overall. Fine, I'll allow that to happen. However, he said nuked. You nuked them. This tape takes place in 1962 and he uses the word nuked, even though that word hadn't seen usage until 1987. That's right. That unwatchable series. Make it again. Now, I know it's going to sound rich for me to say, look, I can suspend my disbelief and believe in nuclear lizards and fucking dudes fusing with their suits to become them, but I draw the line at anachronistic vocabulary. I don't know. I noticed it. It bugged me. And so it's wrong and must be purged from the series as a whole. No, but for real, I think like that's just a great example of what I think of the entire series as a whole would really benefit from, is just having someone else in the scripting room, having someone else, not just for like plot points, but primarily for language. There are a lot of misspelt words in The Man in the Suit, and I want to clarify, I don't want to bring up the typos that exist in the series to be a grammar Nazi or to be any kind of motherfucker about it. My main thing is that fuck it, I'll speak to you directly unknowingly. Everyone skip ahead in the video. Hi, how you doing? This is a great series, and I think you did a really good job on this. The reason I bring up the typos isn't because, you know, they're poor form or they make you look stupid, because I could give a shit about stuff like that. But speaking as a fellow creative, or, you know, someone who's in a creative space, the last thing you want is for really simple stuff to distract your audience from the story you're trying to tell. I've done it a couple times in my past videos where I'll get something wrong, and then that becomes the main focus of conversation at the comments section, despite the fact that it's, you know, not actually about what I said. In my favorite YouTuber is a murderer episode, I spelt out ASDA instead of saying ASDA, because I'm not a filthy British person, and when I see a whole thing capitalized, I wanna spell it out. I'm gonna keep calling it ASDA just to fucking piss you people off. All that's to say is that, like, little simple stuff like that can be fixed fairly easily. Like, if you had another person in the room to look at your scripts or just to copy it or to go through, it can actively make your videos a lot better, just because I understand the aggravation that you must feel not catching something like that, and then having a lot of people draw it, having it have so much attention drawn to it, as opposed to people engaging with the story that you're trying to create. I'm going to go back to the nuke part here, because I'm being really anal retentive about this for some reason, but I do think that the getting nuked part could have been rewritten to be a lot more effective, changing it to, "You killed us. Your bomb took my wife. Your bomb took my kids." I don't know, to me that would resonate a lot harder, because not only is it using non-anachronistic language, I'm gonna be such a prick about this, but also it has that more personal angle. Your bomb. Because if he hates Americans, he would actively blame our main character for that stuff as well. I don't know, just something like that I think would really benefit the series overall. I would like to apologize earlier. I used the phrase people when describing the British, and I'd like to take that back. I really like the series. I think with some very minor changes here and there, and, you know, getting another set of eyes on it on occasion, you could have, like, genuinely one of the best series in the analog horror space. Your editing is there, your storytelling is obviously there as well, and I don't know, I don't know if I have a whole lot more to say about it. It's a good series, and I think if those things were fixed, it would be an easy S tier, but until then, I'm gonna put it in A tier, a very optimistic A tier. This isn't a haha, you didn't get to S, it's this has all the makings of an S tier, but I'm gonna wait till you get there. Give me something good. Give me something controversial. This is not controversial. Surreal Broadcast. Surreal Broadcast, much like Gemini Home Entertainment, or, I don't know, name another one that's kind of a pseudo-anthology of sorts, is a pseudo-anthology that all takes place in the same town, but just covers differing stories as we create the larger narrative as a result. Alien spiders have infested this area in Berkshire County. I actually don't know where it's at. I think it's Maine. I'm gonna say Wisconsin. Minnesota. Yeah, Surreal Broadcast is not bad.
Nice approach.
This is one of those ones where it's like, it's very much just fine for me. I got this one at Eventide Media Center mixed up a lot, primarily because they have very similar aesthetics with both their thumbnails and how their episodes look as a whole. Surreal Broadcast is a good-looking series, all things considered. It has a pretty consistent aesthetic design, which on occasion kind of redefines itself. It's a really well-done and like pseudo-anthology story where all of these stories take place in the same area of Berkshire County. But despite all these things kind of happening, there's not really like a full narrative focal point all the way through. It's more of just like set dressing for the larger plot going on here. What's the larger plot? Space spiders have invaded this county and have burrowed underneath the ground, and on occasion we gotta sacrifice some bitches to them. I'm saying it's only the way it's gotta be, man. They made a full bell tower for this. You've been acting up this year. You're going in the spider contraption. I will say this series does kind of suffer from the same issue that the Man in the Suit does on occasion, where there seems to be really simple typos that probably should have been caught prior to upload. In culture and history, Berkshire is spelt wrong, even though it's the place where all of these videos take place in. Again, it's not a deal breaker by any means, but it goes back to that conversation of this is just a simple, stupid mistake that will distract your audience if they notice it and actively detract from the larger story and narrative you're trying to tell. I'm not certain if Surreal Broadcast was created by someone who has English as their first speaking language. If it is, it's genuinely pretty great, the amount of work they're able to put into it. But it also just kind of goes back to the fact that copy editors are important, and I think it is kind of an underutilized and underappreciated part of our industry. Copy editing, script doctors, really just having another set of eyes to look at your script and the stuff that you're making are imperative for creating some of the best works that exist in not only analog horror, but just fiction in general. Sometimes you need to have another set of eyes on it. And I bet you probably could have found a couple people who would be willing to take a look at these scripts that you made pro bono. That being said, if you're able to, you should pay your script editors. Unless you're homies. But like, again, pay your artists, pay your script editors, pay your copy editors, give them money. But yeah, this is the part where I would say Surreal Broadcast has some great bones to it, and I'm very excited to see where the series goes in the future, because even though, you know, I didn't adore it, I think that it's doing everything right that it needs to come to a great finale. However, Surreal Broadcast has been canceled, and they did that just a couple of months after releasing the trailer for the finale, which is just almost comically cruel, all things considered, which really stinks, because I did like the series as a whole, but it did strike me as one that would really all come together with a well-done conclusion. It's not bad as it is, but it's definitely one of those stories where as you watch it, you're like, I could really see the ending tying everything together in a nice bow. Kind of the same with the Smile tapes, where it's fine on its own, but its ending is really what makes the series at the end. But that's never gonna fucking happen, apparently. So, yeah, B tier. B tier. Not bad, not great. I hope you're not looking forward to that finale, because your ass ain't getting it. I'm gonna do this when there's only one left, I hope you know. It's because it's been pointless the entire time. I'm gonna just reach my hand in without looking. There's no need to shake it up again. Local 58! Local 58 is interesting because chances are, if you have ever enjoyed any of the other analog horrors I mentioned in this series so far, chances are it was probably inspired by Local 58. Was Local 58 the first analog horror? I don't fucking know. Probably not. But it did pioneer a lot of the namestays and some of the most important tropes that have been pretty consistent with other series in the genre since its initial release way back in the day. And it's easy to see why. It's really kind of interesting to watch Local 58 and expect it to be just sort of this, precursor to so many different derivative works, but it remains as fresh as when they uploaded it way back in the day. Yeah, a lot of these other series were inspired by it in some way or another, but that's because Local 58 was just so unique in the way that it did its storytelling and the way it disseminated information to its viewers, and that remains the case here. It's kind of special the more I'm thinking about it. Given how short Local 58 is, like as a whole series, you can probably watch the entire thing in like an hour, I would say. Yet every single episode manages to be some sort of reinvention of itself and just as engaging as the ones that came beforehand. I also got to give it to the series, it's got some phenomenal writing. I dog on certain storytelling decisions as well as some grammatical errors here and there, but really when it comes down to it, a lot of these analog horror series have some phenomenal writing in them. Somewhere. Maybe it's hidden in different episodes, but like, there have been some times where I watched a couple of these where I had to actively pause the video and just say to myself, damn, that was a cold line. Local 58 has some absolute bangers, all things considered. In the public broadcast telling everyone to kill themselves because you gotta, there is a line at the very end that says, this message will repeat until there are none left to read it. That's so cool. That is such a good line. That and like in the dream analysis video a couple episodes later, when it's talking about fun facts about dreams, and it's like, oh, are dreams a way to tell the future? And then having the follow-up line be, no, precognition is a lie. That's really neat. That's really interesting. I was fully expecting to go back to this thing and be like, oh, well, as the originator of all these different tropes, that doesn't mean that it was, phenomenal. Just because a thing came first doesn't mean it did something the best. And I don't think Local 58 did all the things and all the tropes that it sets up the best, but I think all things considered, if you're looking for a series that is actively fresh for episode to episode, is an easy watch, and is just significant to the genre as a whole, Local 58 is the entire package. And I really want to have, concrete criticisms with it, but really the only thing I can give it shit for is the fact that it never uploads anymore. Apparently the creator still has a lot of content he's sitting on and wants to release at a later date, which, you know, depending on how quickly I edit this video, it may be out by the time I upload this. I doubt it, but that's kind of a pro for it as well, when my biggest issue with it is that there's not more of it being put out right now. That's not really a criticism, is it? So, fuck it. Alright, just put it in S tier. Logo 58. Sometimes things do it first, and they do it right. Really right. She came back, and she is sat right underneath my feet right now. So, if you see me jostling from side to side more than usual, it is because I have ADHD, but also the cat's not helping. God, it's pitiful. The sound is like barely left now. We got... Ooh, the Baroque Hour. Call me an asexual pony, because I don't usually fuck with cults. The Baroque Hour is a relatively new analog horror series. I think it just hit like 1,000 subscribers, like at the time of this writing. So, brand fucking new. And it details essentially the rise of a cult dedicated to an old god named Orpheus. That kind of spans the entire world, owns all these different facets of governments, all these different politicians, the movers and shakers, the most influential people in the world. All of them believe in Orpheus and are attempting to further his machination, shall we say. So I guess the question is, why do I like the Baroque Hour so much when I'm so outspoken about my distaste for cults and media as a whole? And that's primarily because they are sort of this insurmountable threat. They are intangible, but they're everywhere. They own every single possible thing, and in my opinion, it kind of neuters whatever stakes that you wanted to create for your main characters or the people that are diametrically opposed to these cults, because they're fucked. They're not just dealing with, like, a fringe group of, you know, maniacs. They're dealing with the world. So why does the Baroque Hour and the Cult of Orpheus work so well for me, where so many other cults haven't? Simple. The Cult of Orpheus is really fucking stupid. I don't mean that in like a derogatory sense. I mean the people involved from start to finish are really fucking stupid. I say this primarily because it seems like the Cult of Orpheus is more or less just a group of people who found out about an old god, found out how to bring him back, and then any amount of cognizant thinking or critical thinking afterwards was just flipped off. Why you bringing back Orpheus? Hey, you gotta. Why not? Every single video they create, it paints this undertone that this cult, despite the fact that they're so well organized and are expanding across the entire globe, really don't know a whole lot about the old god they're trying to bring back. They really don't know a lot about Orpheus and why he does what he does. In one of the videos where they talk about the later stages of the Awake Syndrome, when they're talking about how they've been more or less used for sacrifices for Orpheus, there's a whole section about pray the bodies don't come back to life.
Step 5. Brand the body. Step 6. Hope it doesn't come back to life.
Which I think is really great because it heavily implies they don't know why they do that, or better yet, they're not supposed to. Another thing the Cult of Orpheus does is they blast subliminal messages across TV screens, and those who can see them, those who see through the subliminality, are called, are individuals who are affected by the Awake Syndrome. They don't know why this happens.
We do not yet know the causes of this, but it seems that some individuals possess a particularly developed brain that coincidentally allows them to pass over the filters we apply to avoid detection.
They don't know why this ever happens, and they're really glib about talking about it because it probably freaks them out. They don't know why this happens. Also, in the informational video about the Awake Syndrome, you really get that impression when they have what appears to be an anagram for the Awake Syndrome, but when they spell it out, it doesn't fucking spell awake at all.
First of all, what is an awake? Very simple. Any person who, by an unfortunate coincidence, has managed to consciously view the subliminal messages that we broadcast daily in the global media.
This made me lose my shit. This is really, really good. In a later episode, they talk about how they're going to start essentially having blood drives and then robbing ambulances to steal their blood as sacrifices to Orpheus, and the media picks it up and they're like, yeah, they're calling these bandits the ambulance vampires, which is a stupid fucking name, and then you find out like a few minutes later it was the cult's idea to call them that, and for some reason, that made me like it a lot more. It's like, oh yeah, this dumb, out-of-touch group of dumbasses absolutely would think Ambulance Vampires is a good name. And I think that's kind of a microcosm for why I like this series so much, is because it's really not afraid to, you know, bask in the silliness that is the genre it's in. And I'm a firm believer that any medium that's able to make you laugh can make you feel anything at once afterwards. Once you got them to laugh at you, you got them on the palm of your hands. And the Baroque Hour is a great example of that. It's a funny series on occasion, and that sells the horror that exists therein all the more. I will say I will have to take some points away from the series, primarily because of its earlier utilization of AI voices and whatnot, which is already an ethical nightmare to get into, but also it's not really even well done AI voices. I mean, some of these deliveries...
You have to help me, officer. Officer, you have to believe me. Please, I beg you.
Good day, Mr. Smith.
They control the whole planet. They are everywhere. They have been around for a very long time. Fuck! They are inside the house.
They leave a lot to be desired. Also, I'm pretty sure the voice he used is like that one voice you hear on all the YouTube shorts and TikTok videos where people are just talking about stupid shit. This one.
I wanted to report something unusual, and that honestly has been distressing me since last night.
This woolly motherfucker is not a sheep, but a pig. This lil shit is the prairie dog. This motherfucker is the most dangerous bird in the world.
But thankfully, it does appear that the series has kind of moved away from that, which is good to see, because honestly, I guarantee you, for a series that looks as good as this and is as effective in its writing as this one is, you would more than likely be able to find plenty of people that'd be more than happy to do pro bono work in regards to voice acting and things of the like. But again, pay your actors, pay your artists, I will kill you! But yeah, Orpheus, I know it's gonna be controversial, I know I might get some flack for it, but I gotta put it in S tier. I loved it. I really loved it, and I think it's worth a shot for anyone else interested in a story that has a very fresh and more realistic take on a cult that is also not afraid to be really fucking funny on occasion. Go ahead and give it a try. What could be in my bag of tricks next? We have... oh no. Basswood County Analog Horror. I just want to make a point here that every single thing that I've covered so far in this video, as well as just in general, are all series that I think are worth checking out, and that I am actually recommending to some degree. Even Urban Spook, even though it's a very, very limited recommendation. If you're not fucking with what I talked about, definitely don't check that one out if you don't want to. But all of these, if they made it, it's because I think they have some merit to it overall, because ultimately when I watched these, I didn't go in with the expectations of hating them or having, you know, intrinsic issues with them, but more so along the lines of, this is someone's own personal work in a genre that is budding and interesting and as new as analog horror, and I wanted to take a look at it and see what's available. All that to be said, that I think there's a lot to be said about a series that you have a lot of issues with, but you'd still recommend people check out. The kind of series that you personally do not enjoy and you think has a lot of issues with it, but when you look at it on a foundational level, has all the bones and all the pieces to be something great, but is just not actively reaching that height yet, is not executing it well. There's something really compelling about that, in my opinion. An issue I have with this series is that it doesn't really have a story. It's more or less just slow, meandering text leading to, oh, look at that. A freaky dude, a weird guy, as a strange, lanky boy. But the reason I had difficulties with it is because it really just didn't seem like a story. For the first several episodes, it just seemed like some guy's proof of concept of what his analog horror series would look like. Dark Mind is genuinely a really good artist, and I think did some great job with the illustrations that he has here. I think it's really a shame that they appear on screen as long as they do. This seems like horror mainstay number one. You keep your monster as little seen as possible until it's absolutely necessary, or until a final act. Having this guy appear on screen just superimposed over real images, I'm sorry, but it's not scary to me. Yeah, it's kind of effective when it happens in the first video, but all the other ones have that same formula over and over and over again, to the point where when people say, oh, it's truly terrifying, it's like, what about it is truly terrifying? Like when Jeff Albertson is introduced, he kind of has a story until he's dead, and then hey, more spooky dudes superimposed over real life images. It's one of those things where it's just aggravating to talk about for me because there are genuinely really good bones here. There are really good like elements, and there is talent being seen in these videos, but the execution is just not there. It's just not actively working for me whatsoever, which is a shame because it is ultimately, I think, a well-made series, both stylistically and in the artwork, but it suffers from the fact that it looks like a dude's demo reel. It looks like if someone said, I could probably make an analog horror, and then had that same idea over and over and over and over again. Like, there's one episode where it's just all about like a nice place to live and how to live a peaceful life, and then at the very end, he uses this really overused meme phrase, and then makes a spooky face, and caretaker music comes in the background.
And remember, when you are not running, I'm only getting closer.
I feel like I won an analog horror bingo after I watched that. I think this series would also really benefit from having another pair of eyes on it, primarily so there can be a story to tell, obviously, but also because sometimes there's just such glaring issues with like the lore and how things work in general that it makes me wonder, like, did anyone else take a look at this? There's a scene where there's a guy on the radio who, hilariously, I think even Dark Mind didn't know what the fuck he was saying because he actively put periods where his text should be.
He runs around at an unusual speed.
He wrote the script, and yet his transcription is still without full closed captioning, knowing damn well how difficult it would be to understand this guy with all the filters. But there's a scene where this is happening, and then it's happening on the radio. There's a radio on screen, and then at the end, the guy, he's like,
and this is the last found footage of the criminal at the moment of his stop. Captured by the latest advanced CCTV programs.
Yeah, let me play you a clip on the radio, babe. The famously multimodal media sharing device, the radio! There is a little bit of a story where they bring in the structure where all these freaky dudes came from, but all I could think about during that video was when they were recording it and suddenly they must have flipped on. Like, this is camera footage. And then they must have flipped on their Take On Me filter because then everything becomes drawn, which at that point you probably should have just drew everything to begin with, if I'm being honest with you, or like, did the same superimposing kind of thing you normally do. And that's another thing that I think is interesting because when Dark Mind works with actual like people, with actual models, like his work is really fucking good. Like when he fucked up his own face for that one video I mentioned a second ago, that is really good editing. Like this is almost uncanny. Like I think if he had more scenes where there was an actual human actor and perhaps he just made them longer, like did something in post to make them a bit more inhuman, but superimposed his illustrations over their face, I think it would genuinely be some really freaky stuff. But like I think if I were to describe my main issues with the series overall, it's just in episode 7 there's a moment where there's just a scary face on screen for 10 seconds and it's uninterrupted. There is no accompanying music, there is no accompanying sound effect aside from the hiss of the VHS tape, and then it's gone. And that's kind of the whole series, if I'm being honest with you. Great visuals, but with such poor execution that at this point it's like someone just showing you their art gallery that they made through analog horror form. Which, now that I think about it, might actually be why Urban Spook exists, which... wait a fucking second. But again, it's a difficult thing for me to talk about. And I'm going to be really real here for a second because I don't think there's really anything more compelling to me, at least personally, than seeing something that didn't work for you, but knowing it has all the elements and the foundational moving parts and the talent behind it to make it really, really good. And that's very much the case for Basswood County Analog Horror. I think the issue I have with it primarily is not just that, it employs cheap scares and often doesn't really, do anything more than them to just put up a scary dude on screen for a little bit. I think the main issue I have with it is that there's real, genuine talent happening behind the scenes here, and it's unfortunately not being as executed as well as it could be. Again, I think it's worth checking out if for no other reason than you can see where I'm coming from and you can form your own opinion, but like, as far as series go, I think it needs a lot of work before it's able to actually be considered one of the greats in analog horror. And I think really banging out what the story of this thing is, and then how to handle how often you do the scares in it would really benefit it overall. But I'm gonna put it in the D tier. I bet you it's Petscop. Hey! Does Petscop count as an analog horror? Better question, do I care? Man, Petscop, everyone's talking about Petscop. Everyone was talking about Petscop back in the day. It was the real talk of the town. I was a hipster at the time, so I avoided anything to do with it because I just, I can't be a fan of something if it's popular, don't you know? I'm like a delayed nuke that only goes off a couple years after the war has ended. Just when you think you were safe, only then do I get insufferable about it. But honestly, after watching Petscop, I can see where a lot of people were coming from. It is a really gripping and interesting story with an aesthetic look to it that I don't think has been done as well since maybe Ben Drowned. And that's high fucking praise. It is, I think, one of the best executed horrors in regards to the way it looks and the medium in which it tells its story, as I would say some of the best video game creepypastas ever seen. And that's a big point in its favor. I will say, when they told you that the story of Petscop is incredibly difficult to ascertain and incredibly difficult to figure out, they weren't kidding. That ass can fart. Did I understand the story of Petscop? Fuck no. Does anybody? I don't think so. And that is very much the point. The creator of it actually had more content he was going to put out, but then nixed from the series specifically to give that impression of like, oh, there's even more information I'm not being known about, and that's not being told to me, which is an interesting way of doing storytelling. I hate it, but it's an interesting way of doing it. But I will say, I was never disappointed while watching Petscop. I was never not entertained, and that primarily came as a result of Paul, our main character of the series for the first several episodes, and just his, I want to say, like, Resident Evil-ass writing dialogue that he had.
That's a dead kid.
Nothing gets past Paul. Paul, in my opinion, was the best part of this series, and when he kind of stopped appearing around the mid to end portions of it, I was genuinely really sad. And I think, if I can be so bold, it kind of hurts the series overall having him not be a mainstay the entire time.
12 seconds later. That's kind of fun, actually.
Paul's reactions are so fucking unserious that in moments where I fully was entirely confused and had no clue what was going on, or I was like really unsettled by the visuals on the screen, he would just say something that would make me be like, damn, this guy's stupid as bricks.
What have I just walked into?
I think I'm in the middle of something.
Paul is a great part of the series and genuinely might be one of my favorite characters in like any analog horror, or probably just horror fiction in general, just because of how lovable of a dumbass he appears a lot of the times. And losing his, kind of human perspective in this series as it goes on is really unfortunate. And I think genuinely hurts the series overall once he's gone and once it becomes a essentially dialogueless Let's Play, for lack of better words. See, I like Paul not just because he makes me laugh and I think he's stupid, but because also when things get scary, he has genuine reactions to it. There's a scene where he finds something on the table that he's censoring because it's so personally damning to him as a person, or it's so personally effective to him that he actively does not want the audience to know about it. And his reaction to that is so well done. It's so understated. It's so genuinely like actual human dread and fear going on here.
This one is Care with Eyebrows. So this is Care with Eyebrows.
And I want to talk about the censoring of things as well. At first, it's a really well done, like, visual scare to see, like, oh my god, this was so freaky and so personally evocative to Paul himself that he had to actively censor it. The next 17 times it happens, it becomes much less effective. I'm sorry, this is like the SCP writing of sorts, where after the 13th redacted, you just have to say, I'm sorry, I don't think anything was scary here, I think you just didn't want to have to use your brain. Like, at some points when I was watching Petscop, I was actually like, was this truly so bad he had to censor an entire wall to get this to upload this. I don't know. It's one of those things where the more often it appears, and it's a pretty consistent mainstay of the series, the more you'll start to notice it, and the more it'll start to seem like, oh wow, you just couldn't think of anything to actually put there that's scary? You had to censor that too? Okay, all right, fine. I don't know. It's nothing damning for the series as a whole. It's just one of those things where sometimes it does feel a little lazy when the main horror that we get in an episode is just, oh, here's a thing we're not allowed to see again. But ultimately, I think Petscop is really important because I think it is kind of a cornerstone for internet horror fiction in a way. A guy had to make an entire goddamn video game just to be able to make this story work and to make it as effective as it is. And there's something really compelling about that. There's something really interesting in watching that. I was often confused and didn't really know what was going on, and kind of still am because jury's out on what a lot of these scenes actually mean in the greater scheme of things. But again, I don't think it was one of those occasions where it's like, I kind of came to expect that over time. I do think the earlier portions of Petscop, or rather the first half of it, are much stronger in regards to horror and the story being told, primarily because of Paul's inclusion and because he acts as a sort of human insert for us as an audience. But again, it's never to a point where at the later videos, it's just unpleasant to watch. It's just, you just gotta watch Petscop without Paul. And, you know, yeah, it's still Petscop, but I really like Paul. But yeah, easy A tier. If the story is ever revealed, I'll move it up to S. Scott's honor. There's only one left in here. I don't even know why I'm doing this. And you know what? We've got the Mandela Catalog. I actually watched the Mandela Catalog way back in the day when it initially came out in like 2021, and I thought it was fine. It was one of those things where as I watched like through the entirety of Volume 1, I just had this impression of like, yeah, I see kind of what he's doing with this, but a lot of the horror didn't really hit with me in the right ways. I don't know. Personally, I'm just not really that affected by like biblical horror stories. A Wendigoon I am not. That man's more religious than my grandma, and she's with Jesus. So just for personally, that really didn't do a whole lot for me, but upon a rewatch, and also with the revised version of Volume 1 as well, I will say, don't watch the revised version. Volume 1 is still the better of the two, and I don't mean that just because it tells me to kill myself in the first 10 minutes, which is a great strategy, let me tell you, but also because, you know, it's history at this point. This is kind of, if you were to point at a fucking dude and call him Johnny Analog Horror, it would be the Mandela Catalog. It's one of the most famous ones out there. I understand the want to revise and like create a recreation of episode 1 or the first volume, but also I think it works better as the first one did because it has poor editing. It has that kind of emblematic style that you would notice and you would expect from analog horror around that time, and it's good. It's genuinely really interesting. Also, and this is not even a nitpick, this is just me being a prick, a nitprick if you will. In the revised version of Volume 1, the opening narrator sounds like the dude that does the cock and ball torture copy pasta meme.
We are currently receiving countless reports regarding unidentified hostile organisms that we will refer to as alternates.
Cock and ball torture.
That I'm not removing points for that. I'm just a dickhead, and I thought that was funny, and it made me giggle. But even though Volume 1 didn't really do it for me in a lot of the ways that I hoped it would, you can still see some of the, you know, earliest best namestays within the series itself, and there's a lot of really interesting ideas at play here. I really like the 911 call and like the marching orders they give to 911 operators to be like, hey, they're done for. But I don't think the Mandela Catalog really comes into its own until Volume 2 and 3. Those are some genuinely really good fucking pieces of analog horror. Like, genuinely finds its footing and fully embraces all the different tropes and all the different plot points it was bringing up in Volume 1. I'm not without criticism of that, obviously. I like Thatcher as a character. There's no way in hell that guy's a fucking Midwestern Wisconsin cop. I'm sorry, that's not real. That man is not working on a police force. That's my plug. I'm sorry, I do not buy that for a second. You telling me they're just hiring twinks on the police force in Wisconsin? I've already booked my ticket to Milwaukee. My point being, though, is that I think Volume 2 really succeeds at just kind of expanding on the world building that was created in Episode 1, or Volume 1, and then Volume 3 takes the production value up all the way up, and is a really great watch as a result of that as well. Volume 4 is kind of a mixed bag. I mean, I love some pieces here and there. Like, I like the stuff with, we actually get to see Gabriel luring Adam and Eve to the apple. That's really interesting, I think. But also, Alex, I'm begging you, find just one more actor. You and a fucking bad mustache is not cutting it. This is the joke disguise from every cartoon ever. This is... Alex, please! But all in all, the Mandela catalog's not bad. It's just one of those ones where it takes a second to find its footing, but when it does, it gets really good. And then it kind of, jilts back and forth on that afterwards. But at the same time, it's something that I kind of understand the hype for. I understand why people have enjoyed it as much as they did, and why so many people describe this as one of the best analog horror series ever created. I think it's fine, personally. I can see why all other series were inspired by it and why it's created so many derivative works as a result as well. However, I kind of feel the same way I did back when Volume 1 came out. It's good, it was scary, but I just don't think it affected me nearly as much as it did for a lot of other people. And maybe I'm just wrong. Maybe I've been wrong about everything my entire life, and everything that's happened's just been a perfect coincidence to show off how much of a stupid idiot I am during this video. Maybe. Who knows? I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think I'm gonna put the Mandela catalog in the strange nexus that exists between B and A. I don't think it's quite A tier overall as a series, but I don't think it's quite B tier overall in a series either. This is my tier list. I made those. I birthed those letters. I can do whatever the fuck I want with it. And there you have it. All 24 analog horrors ever that exist. There are no others. Don't comment about it. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead and, if I covered your favorite analog horror series and you think I was right or wrong, make certain to tell me that in the comment section below. And also, if I didn't cover one that you really enjoy, call that out as well. I'd love to add it to my viewing list, and if this video gets enough hate, I might just go ahead and make another one. But I know what you're thinking. Huh, we're near the end of the video, but there's a lot of runtime down there left. There's about 10 minutes left. What's up with that, yo? Is this guy really about to talk about his Patreon for that long? To which I'd say, is that allowed? Wait, can I do? No, actually, because I, in the process of creating this video, thought about a potential criticism somebody could have, which is, how can you judge all of these different works and never have contributed anything to the genre that you're claiming to be an authority on? Or how can you talk about why some of these work and some of these don't when you've never made anything along those lines yourself? So I made something along those lines myself. That's right, I made my entire own analog horror with the help of a couple friends and some archival photos of my dad and my brother. Big shout out to them. Neither of them are watching, but big shout out to them. But yeah, I made my own analog horror, and if you like it, let me know. If you don't like it, really let me know. Boost that engagement. Get out there and get spiteful. Fuck it, I don't care. So without further ado, glitch transition me to it. Did you like it? No, but genuinely, if you liked it, let me know in the comment section below, and if you didn't jive with it, let me know that as well. I'd love to know what I could have done differently and what would have worked more effectively for you. Big shout out to my artist, Basil, for creating all of the different, or rather, recreating the monster and all these photos of my dad and my brother throughout the years. Basil kind of fucking frightens me with how good of an artist they are. Like, if you've ever enjoyed any art on my channel, there's a good possibility it was Basil's. Like, the illustrations for my favorite YouTuber is a murderer, Basil. Me fighting Sans, Basil. I financially supported this white boy sticker on my Patreon. You can get it now. It's Basil. It's Basil all the way up, motherfucker. Big shout out to our very own Lexi Bristow, who also is a phenomenal artist on this channel and also helped me with a lot of the writing and hashing out of final plot points for my analog horror series. But again, if you didn't like it, it is my fault. She had nothing to do with it. Yeah. Yikes. Feel free to check out my upcoming analog horror series detailing and all about my boy Filbert here. Frightening creatures. He's gonna touch you. His body is half a hand. But yeah, without further ado, thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this with your friends. And again, big shout outs to Basil, big shout outs to Lexi, big shout outs to Losi, and big shout outs to my dad and my brother for ostensibly being a part of it. Sorry I killed you, bro. But to be fair, you did tell me my copy of Kirby and the Amazing Mirror was going to explode if I had the same skin as Dark Kirby, so you kind of had this coming.
Suspension in the back of my room. I've been feeling faded off the sun and the